Welcome to Rock Painting Workshops. Today we are going to create a really cute little whale on our rock. So first we're going to start with our sketching. So let's put the ocean waves in, just some curves there. And I'm now going to take it up into a half oval shape out of the water, and this is going to be the whale's main body. And we'll just flick that over to the right with a bit of a curvy tail. Mine's not too even, not too perfect or anything. Okay, I'm using a regular HB mechanical pencil, and I'm just popping in all the main lines, outlines that I want to create my colouring in rock. Any ideas I have, I can just pop them in with the pencil. Once you're happy with the outline of your whale, you can take one of your fine line acrylic paint pens and start drawing in the outlines. Now this is how I create the colouring in rocks. So it doesn't have to be perfectly following the drawing. The drawing with the HB mechanical pencil, that was just to get an idea where you want to go with it. Now we're putting in the colouring in line. This isn't the top line, this isn't the final line, okay? This is like the line that you see in children's colouring in books. It's just going to give us an idea of the shape that we want, and I'm pretty happy with that whale there. I didn't bother with the cheeks, putting them in, and you'll see why later. So take your polymer eraser and just take away those graphite lines on the rock. You can see that was pretty easy to do. Brush away any of the excess and just get your workplace nice and tidy for the colouring in. Okay, just have a look at the whale here and you can see the outlines that I used to create him. Okay, and now we're just going to run over with a nice layer of our acrylic paint pens. I use Posca in the videos, but I also like to use Artistro and Tuli Art brands, all in acrylic paint pen on rocks. And sometimes these rocks that I'm doing this series of colouring in rocks on, they have been sliced, so they're quite shiny and not very porous, so the paint's not soaking in. Some of it's just sitting on top, and all that means is it's just going to take a little bit longer to dry. It doesn't mean I want to go too thick on this layer. I'm still keeping a nice thin layer of paint, because once the thin layer evens itself out and it dries, I'll come back and add a second coat onto it to make it a thicker colour if needed. So you can just see them taking it nice and thin and letting it be. Now a lot of people sort of say, oh well, why bother putting all the features in if you're just going to cover it up? And that's just for my looking at it. I can see the ratio of all the items on the whale. I can see where they're all going to fit on the rock. To me, I'd just rather sketch that out and get an idea, come back in later and finalize it with my the top outlines. But I like to think, get it sort of imprinted in my mind. Okay, that's how big the mouth's going to be. The eyes are going to be going here. It is in my subconscious that I know where I'm going with that, with those lines. So that's one layer of paint, and you can see it's not quite fully filled in. But here I've let the first layer dry, and I've taken a second layer. I've got some water. I've got a cloth off to the side. And I've just got a thin paintbrush, and I'm going to do some shading. So you can see here I've just dotted on my acrylic paint pen, and while that paint is still wet, I'm taking my paintbrush and I'm just giving that a smush around for some shading. Now my brush was dipped in the water and it was wiped off on the cloth, so it's only damp. It hasn't got a lot of excess water hanging on it. And I'm just smushing that colour around just to give it a little bit of shading, a little bit of depth. Put the blue there. I can come in, put a little bit of blue on the top where the spout hole is. Anywhere I think a little bit of shadow might sit. doesn't have to be perfect. It's just your interpretation of where you think it needs to go. And here I'm putting a darker aqua into the waves. You'll see here I'm just going to smush that around. And that's the shadow of where the whale is sitting on top of the water. So his body would have a bit of shadow and the waves of the water would have a little bit of shadow. I think that looks about right for shading. So I'm going to do my final lines on the outside. And this is when I would also put in the final lines of his mouth and eyes as well. First, let's put those little waves back in. And you can see I turn my rock around as I go. Okay, I don't try to draw across the rock. It's quite easy to match up the lines as you go. But when you're reaching across the rock, that's when you get into all sorts of difficulties. So I just turn that rock around to suit where my hand is at the time. Excuse me. Now put the spout hole in and just a little bit of water coming out of the spout hole. And now we can put in the face features. Sometimes you can see a little bit through the paint. You won't see a lot. And I've got the coral in Posca, and if you pop that on his cheeks and just dab it with your finger, it gives a little bit of a washed out look. And that wishy-washy look gives a really cute look to rosy cheeks on your rocks. And here I'm just putting the permanent mouth, and you can see there the outlines are done for our whale. And then take your white pen and just where you think that a little bit of sun reflection, light reflection would hit the whale, you can just put in little dots and dashes just to create that highlighted area on your rock. Especially in the eyes, make sure they're on the same side. So the dots were both on the left-hand side of each eye. And there you go, there's your little whale. I'm just going to add a few splashes of water. Just dot my pen on to represent the splashes. You don't have to do this bit. And he's all done. Ready to be sealed.